Okay, let's just dive right in. We are looking at a story today that I think everyone thinks they know.
Oh, for sure.
It's been in the movies, it's in books, it's practically American folklore at this point.
Right.
But when you actually peel back those layers, the Hollywood myth and all that,
Right.
and get down to the raw files, the actual FBI reports, the mechanics of it, the physics of the water, it stops being a story about a simple prison break.
It really does. It becomes this story about, well, impossible engineering.
Exactly.
It's the ultimate locked room mystery, except, the room is a fortress, the lock is the Pacific Ocean, and the penalty for failure isn't just getting caught.
No.
It's death. It's death by hypothermia or drowning.
We are talking, of course, about Alcatraz,
Mm-hmm.
the Rock, and specifically the night of June 11th, 1962,
Mm-hmm.
the disappearance of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. And I'm choosing that word disappearance very intentionally, because even now, sitting here in February 2026, we still don't officially have a body.
And that's the thing. That's the detail that keeps this whole mystery alive. If they had found a body on June 12th, 1962, this would be a footnote in a history book.
Right. Attempt number 15 failed.
Exactly, failed. But because of the silence, because of all the ambiguity, it's just become this great American mystery.
And the timing for this deep dive, for us looking at it right now, isn't random. There's actually a legal clock ticking in the background that I don't think most people know about.
Not at all.
Later this year, September 2026, a very specific deadline hits regarding the warrants for these men. But we'll get to that. First, we need to really understand the machine they were trying to break.
You really have to contextualize Alcatraz in the early 60s. This wasn't just another prison. It was a psychological weapon.
The end of the line.
It was the end of the line. If you messed up at Leavenworth, if you were too violent for Atlanta, they sent you to the Rock.
It was sold as the ultimate maximum security facility. But was it actually inescapable, or was it just, good branding?
It was a bit of both, but, mostly it was geography. The prison itself was formidable, no question. You had tool-proof steel bars, remotely operated doors, even tear gas canisters in the ceiling of the dining hall.
Right.
But the real wall wasn't made of concrete. The real wall was the San Francisco Bay.
I was looking at the water temperature data from back then. In June, you're looking at, 50, maybe 54 degrees Fahrenheit?
Exactly. And that's not just cold. That is immediate, incapacitating physiological shock.
What does that actually do to a person?
Well, the second you hit that water unexpectedly, you gasp. It's an involuntary reflex. If you happen to gasp while you're underwater, you drown instantly.
Wow.
And even if you survive that, if you stay in it for more than 20 minutes without a modern wetsuit, you lose dexterity. Your hands stop working. You can't grip anything. Hypothermia sets in so fast.
And that's before we even talk about the currents.
Oh, the currents around Alcatraz are like a river in the ocean. On an outgoing tide, the water is moving at about 6 knots.
6 knots. For perspective, that's faster than Michael Phelps can swim.
Way faster. So if you jumped in at the wrong time, you weren't swimming to San Francisco, you were being flushed out under the Golden Gate Bridge and straight into the open Pacific. No chance.
And the prison's history really reflects that difficulty.
It does. From 1934 to 1963, 36 men tried to escape in 14 separate attempts. Most were caught immediately.
Some were shot.
Several were shot, a few drowned, and their bodies were found. Until June of 1962, the prison had what they considered a perfect record: 0 successful exits.
So enter our anomalies. The 3 men, well, 4 men, really, and we definitely need to talk about the 4th man who looked at this impossible math problem and decided, yeah, we can solve this. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers.
And this is where we have to start separating the men from the myth. In the movie, Clint Eastwood plays Frank Morris as this cool, stoic, almost heroic figure. But the real Frank Morris was a much more complex and maybe even a darker figure.
Yeah, I was reading his profile. He was orphaned at 11, convicted of his first crime when he was just 13. He basically spent his entire life inside the system.
He was completely institutionalized. He literally didn't know a life outside of walls. But the standout detail in his file, the thing that just makes you stop and pause, is that IQ score.
133.
That is in the top 2% of the population. That is officially superior intelligence. He wasn't just street smart. He had the ability to think abstractly, to plan meticulously, and to see patterns that other people missed.
He was a pattern recognition machine.
Precisely. Where other inmates saw a solid wall, Morris saw a grid. He saw the routine, he saw the guard shifts, he saw the weakness in the system. And his personality, he was described as quiet, affable even, but completely disconnected emotionally.
Really?
The FBI files note he wasn't close to anyone, not even his mother. He was like a ghost in the machine, which made him the perfect leader for something like this. And he had a history of escapes.
Right, from Louisiana State Penitentiary.
He'd done it before. He knew the mechanics of a breakout.
And then you have the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence. And they seem like the polar opposites of a guy like Morris.
They were country boys. They came from a huge family, 13 kids in Georgia. They were seasonal farm workers who traveled up and down the country with their family, picking cherries and cotton.
And that background, that's not just trivia. There is a specific skill set they developed as kids that I think is the absolute linchpin of this entire escape attempt.
You're talking about the swimming.
Yes. The FBI files mention it, but it often gets glossed over in the movies and the stories.
It's absolutely crucial. When they were kids, the family would go up to Michigan for the cherry harvest, and the brothers would swim in Lake Michigan.
In Michigan.
Early in the season, we were talking like when there was still ice breaking up and floating on the surface.
So they were basically ice swimmers.
They were conditioned to cold water shock. They'd likely had what scientists now call brown fat adaptation. Their bodies were just used to regulating temperature in freezing conditions. So while the average inmate hitting the 50-degree bay would go into shock and drown,
The Anglins would just be
it would just be another Tuesday for them. This completely changes the calculus of the escape. The prison relied on the water being a lethal, impassable barrier. For the Anglin brothers, it was just a really, really cold swimming pool.
That's a huge advantage.
And they were inseparable. They did everything together. They were bank robbers, but sort of the nonviolent kind. They famously used a toy gun in one of their heists because they didn't want to accidentally shoot anyone.
They were thieves, not killers.
Exactly.
Okay, so you have the brains, that's Morris. You have the swimmers, or the muscle, the Anglins. But we have to talk about the fourth man, the man who usually gets cropped out of the picture, Allen West.
Allen West is maybe the most tragic figure in this entire story, and also the most important for us, historically speaking. He was the mechanic of the group.
He was a car thief, right? Had a more violent reputation than the Anglins.
Very different. And there's always been this debate about who actually masterminded the whole plan. West always claimed it was him, didn't he?
He did. After the escape, when he was being debriefed, he told the FBI he was the architect, that he devised the whole plan, and the others just followed his lead.
Most historians, they really doubt that. Morris clearly had the intellect and the escape history, but West was the insider. He worked on the maintenance detail. He knew where the tools were. He knew the layout of the utility corridors.
So the dynamic was tense.
Very tense. Morris was the leader. The Anglins were the engine, the power. West was, well, he was almost like the contractor they hired for his specialized knowledge. And as we'll see, when the critical moment came, that group cohesion just fell apart.
So let's get into the how, because to me, this is the most fascinating part of the whole thing. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment run-for-the-fence deal. This was 6 months of clandestine, high-level engineering.
It was a workshop. They essentially built a factory inside a maximum security prison. It's mind-boggling.
Okay, so step one,
Yeah.
you've got to get out of your cell.
Right. The cells at Alcatraz weren't modern. They had these small ventilation grills down near the floor, about 6 by 9 inches. Behind them was a utility corridor, a service chase for all the pipes and wiring.
So the plan was to widen that hole enough to slide through.
Exactly. But the walls are reinforced concrete. You can't just chip away at that with a spoon.
Well, you can, but it would take you about 100 years.
And you'd make a racket. So they built a drill.
This is the MacGyver part of the story.
This is pure genius. They somehow managed to get their hands on a motor from an old broken vacuum cleaner from the prison supplies.
Okay, pause there. A vacuum cleaner motor, I'm just trying to picture this. A vacuum motor spins at a really high RPM, right?
Yeah.
So basically a fan. It's not designed to drill rock.
It's a terrible drill motor. You're absolutely right. It has super high speed but almost zero torque. If you push it against a wall, it just stops spinning.
So they couldn't just jam a drill bit into it?
No, they had to modify the casing to allow it to spin freely while they applied pressure separately. It was a really clever workaround.
And the power source.
Yeah.
I mean, there aren't exactly outlets in the cells at Alcatraz.
They tapped directly into the light fixture in the ceiling. They spliced wires right into the prison's main electrical grid.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It was. One spark, one blown fuse, and the guards would know something was up. But the biggest problem wasn't even the electricity, it was the bit. You can't exactly buy a masonry bit at the prison commissary.
So what did they use? What do you drill concrete with when you have nothing?
Metal spoons from the mess hall and discarded saw blades they found. They would sharpen the spoons into a crude cutting edge, but drilling is probably the wrong word.
They were grinding it.
They were abrading it. They were grinding it away, dust mote by dust mote, for months.
And grinding makes noise. A tiny vacuum motor screaming in a concrete cell block. How on earth did the guards not hear this?
This is my favorite detail of the whole skib. Frank Morris played the accordion.
It sounds like a joke. It can't be real.
It's absolutely real, and it was sonic camouflage. Alcatraz had a designated music hour in the early evening. Inmates were allowed to play instruments. Morris, conveniently, was learning the accordion.
And an accordion is loud.
It's a bellows instrument. It produces this loud, resonant, multi-frequency sound.
Well,
It's the perfect audio cover to mask the high-pitched whine of a small electric motor.
so Morris is just pumping out Lady of Spain or whatever.
Yep.
And behind the wall, in the next cell, West or one of the Anglins is sweating, grinding away at the concrete.
And they had to be in perfect sync. The second the music stopped, the drilling had to stop instantly.
Coordination is just insane.
Yeah.
Okay, so they get through the wall. Now they're in the utility corridor.
Right.
But you can't just walk out. They need a vehicle. They need a boat.
They needed a raft. And this is the part that logically should have been completely impossible. They needed rubber, lots and lots of rubber. Raincoats. They managed to source over 50 rubberized raincoats from around the prison.
50. How do you steal 50 raincoats without the quartermaster noticing that his entire stock is gone?
Well, it wasn't all at once. It was a slow drip over months. Some were stolen from the clothing issue room. Some were donated by other inmates who knew something was going on but kept their mouths shut.
The inmate code.
The inmate code at Alcatraz was incredibly strong. No one snitched.
So they have this giant pile of raincoats. How do you turn a coat into a boat?
You need to seal the seams. You can stitch them, but stitches leak water. You need to actually bond the rubber together. In the industry, that's called vulcanization.
Which usually requires, what, high-pressure industrial ovens and chemicals?
Exactly. They didn't have an oven.
But they had steam pipes.
They had steam pipes. The utility corridor they were working in was full of these massive, scalding hot pipes carrying steam to the cell block. They used the pipes as a makeshift heat press.
Unbelievable.
They would clamp the seams of the raincoats against those hot pipes until the rubber literally melted and fused together into a waterproof bond.
The smell must have been horrific. Just burning rubber filling that corridor.
It must have been pungent. But again, you have to remember, a prison smells. It smells of industrial cleaning fluid and unwashed bodies and the sea air and sewage. They somehow managed to mask it within all of that.
And the design. They didn't just guess at the shape of a raft, did they?
No, they were readers. This wasn't guesswork. They found articles and copies of Popular Mechanics and Sports Illustrated that were in the prison library.
Seriously.
Yes. They found articles about raft design and how to make life preservers. They used the actual dimensions from the magazines to create a 6 by 14-foot inflatable raft.
6 by 14 feet. That is massive. Where do you hide a boat that size in Alcatraz?
They found a blind spot. Above the main cell block, there was a ceiling, and then above that, the roof. In between, there was this dusty crawl space full of ventilation equipment. No one ever went up there.
A secret workshop.
They set up a secret workshop on the roof of the cell block. They worked in shifts. They had lookouts posted. It was a full-blown operation.
Incredible. And to inflate it, you can't just blow it up by mouth.
They converted a concertina, which is a small accordion-like instrument, into a bellows pump. They modified the valves so it would only push air in one direction.
So the accordion saved them twice. Once for the noise and once for the air.
Exactly. But all of this work, the drilling, the raft building, it takes months. And the guards do counts constantly.
12 times a day.
The head count. So they needed to be in their bunks for every single count, even while they were up on the roof working. They needed to be in two places at once.
They needed decoys.
The dummy heads.
This is the most visceral, creepy part of the whole story.
It really is. They sculpted these heads out of a mixture of soap, toothpaste, concrete dust from the drilling, and toilet paper.
It's basically prison papier-mâché.
It is, but they were artists. They were meticulous. They painted them with flesh tone paints that they stole from the maintenance shop. But the detail that always gets me is the hair.
Tell me about the hair.
They swept up real human hair from the barbershop floor, and they carefully glued it, strand by strand, onto the dummy heads. They gave them eyebrows, they gave them hairlines that matched their own.
That is both gruesome and absolutely brilliant.
It was necessary. The guards walked the main corridor, the Broadway, at night. The lighting was really dim. They were just looking for a silhouette, a shape of a head on a pillow. The real hair made that silhouette completely convincing.
So the stage is set, the raft is vulcanized, the holes are drilled, the heads are ready. June 11th, 1962.
The timeline here is absolutely critical. 9:3 p.m., lights out, the routine count happens, the guards walk by, shine their flashlights in, they see the men apparently asleep in bed.
But they aren't in bed.
No. Morris and the Anglin brothers slide their fake ventilation covers, which they made from painted cardboard, to the side. They squeeze through the holes. They're in the utility corridor.
But West isn't with them.
This is the failure point. This is the moment it all goes wrong for one of them. Alan West is stuck.
What happened? He'd been working on it for months.
He had become paranoid that the guards might notice his grill was loose during a shakedown. So, in the days leading up to the escape, he used that homemade cement paste to shore up the wall around the grill.
No.
He essentially re-cemented the grill in place.
He locked himself in.
He over-engineered his own trap. So while Morris and the Anglins are in the corridor, waiting, West is in his cell, frantically kicking at the grill, chipping at the fresh cement with a spoon. He's sweating, he's panicking, he can't make too much noise.
And the others. Morris, what did they do?
They tried to help. Morris actually came back to West's vent from the corridor side. They were pulling and pushing together, one on each side, but it wouldn't budge.
And the clock is ticking.
The tides wait for no man. They had a very specific window to hit the outgoing tide. If they waited too long, the current would turn and push them back toward the island. Morris had to make the executive decision.
He had to leave him behind.
Imagine that moment. The whisper through the vent, "Oh, we have to go." And West is just left there, in the dark, listening to them leave.
So the three of them climb up.
It's a 30-foot climb up the plumbing pipes inside that corridor to get to the ceiling. They reach the roof ventilator. They had already prepped this, of course. They'd cut the rivets and replaced them with fake bolts that they made out of soap.
Soap bolts. Another incredible detail.
They pop the ventilator, squeeze out onto the main prison roof. They are now under the night sky. The wind is howling off the bay. The fog is rolling in.
But they're still, what, 50, 60 feet up?
They have to get down to the ground. They slide down a bakery smokestack, a 50-foot drop, using the pipes for friction. They hit the ground in a known blind spot near the power plant.
And the guards in the towers. The searchlights.
They had timed the sweeps. They knew the patterns. They moved in the shadows between the light. They reached the water's edge at the northeast shore of the island.
And this is around 11:40 p.m.
That's the best estimate we have, yeah. They inflate the raft using that converted concertina. They throw their homemade life vests on. They push off into the black, freezing water.
And West. What's he doing?
West finally managed to kick his grill out. He climbed up through the hole, up the pipes, onto the roof. But by the time he got there, he looked out at the bay, and it was empty. They were gone. He was alone.
That moment must have been just devastating. But also, in a really weird way, it saved his life, or at least his freedom, because he went back.
He turned around, he returned to his cell, put the grill back in place as best he could, and went to sleep. Which meant the next morning, he was there to tell the FBI exactly how it all happened. Without West's testimony, we might never have known about the vulcanization or the drill. It would have just been a complete mystery.
So the sun comes up, June 12th, 7 a.m.
The morning whistle blows. The guards start the morning count. They walk down the line. Get up, time for breakfast.
They get to Clarence Anglin's cell.
He doesn't move. The guard shouts at him. Nothing. The guard gets annoyed, reaches through the bars to shake the pillow.
And the head just rolls off.
It rolls off the pillow, hits the concrete floor with this hollow thud, and the nose breaks off.
I would pay an obscene amount of money to have seen the look on that guard's face in that moment.
It was pandemonium. The sirens go off, the general alarm. The entire island goes into immediate lockdown. The guards are running around checking the other cells. They find Morris's dummy head. They find John Anglin's.
The realization must have been so humiliating. We've been guarding soap dolls all night long.
It was a massive, massive embarrassment for the Bureau of Prisons. The warden had famously bragged for years that the prison was absolutely escape-proof.
So the hunt begins.
And it was one of the largest in history. Helicopters, Coast Guard cutters, FBI agents, military ground troops. They scoured the bay. They scoured the coastline.
And they started to find things. Debris.
They did. They found a small packet of letters belonging to one of the Anglins, sealed in rubber, floating near Angel Island. They found some paddle-like pieces of wood, and crucially, they found one of the homemade life vests washed up on Cronkite Beach.
And a little later, a wallet.
Yes, a wallet containing photos and names of Anglin family relatives was found floating in the water.
And this is where the whole narrative splits in two, because the FBI looked at this exact evidence and drew one very firm conclusion.
Their logic was this. These men are hardened criminals. They're survivors. They would never, ever leave their personal contacts, their family photos behind, unless they had absolutely no choice. The fact that the wallet was floating means the raft must have flipped or broken apart, all the gear was lost, and the men drowned.
It's the Occam's razor theory, right? The simplest explanation is that the ocean won. It always wins.
And to support this, they had a potential body sighting. A Norwegian freighter, the SS Norefjell, reported seeing a body floating in the ocean about 15 miles out on July 17th, so 5 weeks later.
But the coroner at the time disputed that, didn't he?
He did. He argued that after 5 weeks in saltwater, a body wouldn't be floating high enough to be easily spotted from a ship's deck. And the description of the clothing didn't perfectly match the prison uniforms. He thought it was much more likely a suicide jumper from the Golden Gate Bridge.
So inconclusive at best. But the FBI stuck to their guns. Presumed drowned.
They did. For them, it was case closed.
Sort of.
But we aren't here for case closed. We're here for the deep dive. And the case for survival is surprisingly strong, especially when you start looking at the details that the FBI either ignored or, maybe conveniently dismissed.
Let's go back to the currents. For decades, the official assumption was that the currents would have just swept them out to sea to their deaths. But in 2014, scientists at Delft University in the Netherlands did a sophisticated computer model.
This is using modern hydrodynamics, right?
Exactly. They plugged in the exact tide data, the exact currents from the night of June 11th, 1962. And they found something amazing. If the men had launched at midnight, yes, they get swept out to sea and die, BUT, if they launched at 11:30 p.m., which is much closer to when we think they actually hit the water.
The model shows the current creates a sort of gyre, an eddy. It would have pushed them specifically toward Horseshoe Bay, which is right near the north tower of the Golden Gate Bridge.
And coincidentally, that is exactly where the life vest and other debris was found.
It matches the physics of the bay perfectly.
And we have practical proof now, too. I mean, just a few months ago, November 2025, Mark Rober, along with Johnny Harris and Cleo Abram, they did this full-scale, incredible recreation.
That was a fantastic piece of investigative journalism. They didn't just guess at it. They built the raft using the same period-accurate glue, the same type of raincoats. They tested the cold water swimming.
And they proved it was possible.
They proved that physically, 3 fit men could absolutely make that crossing if they hit the tide just right. It wasn't a suicide mission after all. It was a viable, if extremely dangerous, route.
Okay, so if they hit land, where did they go?
This brings us to the blue Chevrolet.
I love this detail. It feels so cinematic.
The day after the escape, a police report was filed in Marin County, which is right where they would have landed. A 1955 blue Chevy was reported stolen overnight.
And later that same day.
There were multiple reports of a blue Chevy being driven recklessly by 3 men near Stockton, California. They allegedly forced another motorist completely off the road.
Stockton is inland. It's the perfect route to get to the Central Valley and then head south to Mexico.
It aligns perfectly with what Alan West told the FBI. He said the plan was always to get to shore, steal a car, and then drive separately to Mexico. The FBI dismissed it because they never found the car, but the timing is just too perfect.
And then there's the business with the footprints.
Ah, the Angel Island evidence. For years, the official FBI line was, no raft was ever found. But a 2011 documentary uncovered a hidden FBI memo. It stated that a raft was found on Angel Island the day after the escape.
A raft was found.
And not just a raft footprints leading away from it up the beach.
Why on earth would they hide that?
Because it completely destroys the drowned immediately narrative. If they made it to Angel Island, they made it halfway. They were out of the worst of the current. It proves survival was not just possible, but probable.
Okay, so let's just assume for a minute they made it. They get the car, they get to Mexico.
Yeah.
Then what? Do they just vanish off the face of the earth?
They go dark. But the Anglin family didn't. And this is where the story gets really spooky and compelling.
Flowers.
For years, up until she died in 1973, the Anglin's mother received a beautiful bouquet of flowers every single Mother's Day. No card, no name, just flowers.
And there were Christmas cards, too.
In December of 1962, the family got a Christmas card signed John. The FBI got a hold of it and had their handwriting experts analyze it. And in classic FBI fashion, the result was inconclusive. They couldn't prove it was him, but the handwriting was close enough that they couldn't rule it out either.
And then you have the funerals. This feels like something straight out of a spy novel.
Yeah.
It does. When the mother died, several witnesses reported seeing two unusually tall women in heavy makeup and veils attending the funeral. The implication, of course, being that it was John and Clarence in drag.
Which sounds ridiculous, but then you remember they were bank robbers who were known to use disguises.
Exactly. And when the father died in 1989, witnesses saw two bearded men standing in the back of the funeral home. They didn't speak to anyone, and they vanished the second the service was over.
But the biggest piece of evidence, I mean, the thing that actually looked like tangible proof, is the photo, the Brazil photo.
Right. This actually surfaced back in the 90s, but it's really gained traction recently with new AI analysis. A childhood friend of the Anglins, a guy named Fred Britti, claimed he ran into them and visited them in Brazil in 1975.
Now, we have to be really skeptical here. Britzi was a known drug smuggler. He was a con artist. He had every reason in the world to make up a story to mess with the feds.
Absolutely. The source is extremely tainted. But he produced a photograph. It shows two men standing by a roadside near a big termite mound. They're wearing sunglasses. They look older, weathered.
And you can't just eyeball it and say, yeah, that looks like them.
No, you can't. But in 2020, a team of forensic analysts ran that photo through a state-of-the-art facial recognition AI. They compared the biometric data, the distance between the ears, the shape of the chin, the slope of the forehead, against the official 1960s mugshots of John and Clarence.
And the result was?
The AI came back with a 99.9% match. It concluded that the men in the photograph were, with almost absolute certainty, the Anglin brothers.
99.9%. That's really hard to ignore.
It suggests that Fred Brizzi, despite being a total liar about everything else, might have been telling the truth about this one thing. They were alive and well, living on a farm in Brazil.
And finally, that brings us to the letter, the 2013 letter.
This was sent to the San Francisco Police Department. It was handwritten, kind of shaky, and the author claimed to be John Anglin.
Can you read us the key parts? It's chilling.
It said, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely."
Barely. I find that word so convincing. It acknowledges how hard it must have been. It doesn't sound like a brag.
No, it doesn't. The letter went on to claim that Frank Morris died in 2008 and that Clarence died in 2011. And then the writer offered a deal.
What was the deal?
He wrote, "If you announce on TV that I will be promised to first go to jail for no more than a year and get medical attention, I will write back to let you know where I am. This is no joke."
Did the FBI take the deal? Did they make the announcement?
No, but they did analyze the letter. They checked for latent fingerprints. They compared the handwriting to known samples from the 1960s.
Now, let me guess. Inconclusive.
Inconclusive, exactly. The problem is you're comparing the handwriting of an 83-year-old man who says he has cancer to the handwriting of a healthy 30-year-old man from 50 years prior. Hands shake, styles change. The FBI concluded they couldn't confirm it, so they didn't act on it.
If that letter was real, then John Anglin probably died somewhere around 2014 or 2015.
Which brings us, finally, to today, February 2026.
So why does this still matter? Why is the U.S. Marshal Service still technically looking for these guys?
Because there is no statute of limitations on escaping from a federal prison, but there's a practical limit. The active arrest warrants expire when the subjects turn 100 years old.
And we are hitting that milestone, literally right now.
Frank Morris was born in September of 1926. He turns 100 years old in September of this year.
So come September 2026, the warrant for Frank Morris just vanishes.
If he is somehow still alive, which is, incredibly unlikely but not impossible, he becomes a free man. The chase officially ends.
That is a staggering thought. The United States government actively pursued these men for 64 years.
And if they survived, they won. They beat the House. They lived entire lives, 50, 60 years outside the cage.
It's the ultimate underdog story, isn't it? The cold, hard logic of the system said, you will drown. And these three guys said, no, actually, we'll build a boat out of raincoats and an accordion.
And that's why we love this story. We want to believe that human ingenuity can beat the unbeatable system. We want to believe that the impossible exit was really just a very, very difficult exit.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought. The next time you see a picture of Alcatraz or you're looking out across the bay at the Golden Gate Bridge, don't just see the scenery. Think about three men shivering in the dark, pumping a homemade bellows, pushing off into that black freezing water.
And ask yourself, did the ocean take them that night, or are they the only ones who ever truly and completely beat the rock?
If you want to dive deeper into this, we have linked the Delft University study, the fantastic Mark Rober recreation video, and the creepy but amazing photos of the dummy heads in our show notes. Go look at the Brazil photo and decide for yourself.
The eyes don't lie. I really think it's them.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Stay curious.